Welcome to Season 5 of the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and Agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. I'm excited today to be talking with someone who I've collaborated with on a few articles, amongst other things. We've discussed AI, customer experience, and journey orchestration based on our experiences working with leading brands. I'd like to welcome Matthew Egol, founder and CEO of JourneySpark Consulting. And today we're going to talk about true customer-centric journey orchestration. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Greg, it's great to be with you. I'm excited to collaborate and talk about these topics today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know we've done so much talking kind of offline and collaborating and stuff. I'm excited to share some of this with our audiences. So why don't we start by you giving a little background on yourself as well as what you're currently doing at JourneySpark Consulting.
I launched JourneySpark Consulting to work with leading brands to accelerate value from their investments in customer experience. I love to help on the org design, the culture, the strategy, and putting in place more agile approaches to continuous experimentation. And JourneySpark Consulting is all about providing more flexibility to work with companies on these topics.
Great. Well, yeah, so let's we'll dive in here and get started by talking about setting the right goals for our efforts. Any enterprise is going to have several KPIs in place that drive business decisions. But given that we want to talk about customer centricity here today, perhaps there are some goals to add. So in an article that we co-wrote recently for CMS Wire, we recommended consideration of customer lifetime value, or CLV, as a shared organizational and customer metric of success. Why is CLV an important thing to consider?
Many companies have multiple business outcomes they focus on, as well as other metrics like Net Promoter Score that they're using to try to drive customer centricity and business value. What I love about customer lifetime value is it's a simple, focused approach that links many things together. It goes beyond what Net Promoter Score does, which really allows you to get a top-level view about how engaged your customers are with your brand and how many of them are promoters, to connect that more specifically with business outcomes. And customer lifetime value is something that allows you to see how the different levers of your business model come together. CLV is driven by both ongoing revenue and improvements in cost. So if you had to have one number, and I'm not a fan of golden metrics, but if you had to pick one number to focus on, CLV brings it together.
Yeah, and totally agree. And I think when we're talking about journey orchestration as well, I think what you were saying about NPS, and certainly there's a lot of organizations use that in successful ways, but I like what you said about CLV being a little more able to measure across the journey. And, just would love your thoughts on, why CLV can really be powerful when we're talking about customer journey orchestration.
What you want to do with journey orchestration is be able to see the behaviors you're driving, the impact that's having on the experience and the emotions people feel during the experience. So both behaviors and feelings and emotions, and whether or not that's converting to the outcomes you want. And journey orchestration is about not just creating something once and done, like launching a website and coming back 4 years and seeing how and relaunching it, but driving continuous experimentation, applying more agility to these ongoing efforts to improve experience. And while CLV is something that measures things over the lifetime of a customer, you can start to see behaviors early in the journey and are able to then predict the CLV. For example, in health insurance, the way people engage in the first 90 days after enrollment has a big impact on the lifetime value of a member. Similarly, in a retailer or direct-to-consumer brand, when you have loyalty programs, the behavior in the first 90 days after signing up is key to ongoing adoption of behaviors that make you the highest lifetime value.
Yeah, and I think this is where, I think the challenge with a lot of the lagging indicators, and and I'll lump NPS in there, and even you could look at CLV as kind of a lagging indicator if you only look at the end result. But I think what you're saying is this kind of marriage of journey orchestration, measuring across the journey and leading up to CLV, and even predicting CLV. To me, that sounds like a good marriage of leading and lagging indicators to really drive value. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think a lot of people are trying to get to something that's more proactive and predictive. Yeah. And they're also trying to get to things that are beyond the marketing campaign itself to the ongoing experience. So, there are a lot of siloed efforts in companies. CLV allows you to integrate across them, and you can get beyond the ad campaign or the email campaign or the social campaign to see the holistic impact on the customer behavior and the economic value of that relationship. Now, you can still derive ongoing continuous optimization of the different piece parts, but CLV allows you to see the forest for the trees. And it also allows you to see the economic value earlier in the customer cycle versus the long lag times with a lot of pre-post testing for campaigns.
Yeah, agreed. And so, I know both of us have worked with, some of the largest organizations, and, many the Fortune 1000s and things like that. And, you would think with all the resources at their disposal that something like journey orchestration would be relatively simple to get off the ground and things, but much is the case of it's difficult to get started. And, while it can be extremely powerful when it's implemented, there's a lot of things that need to get done and put in place to do it really well. What would your advice be to an organization trying to set some realistic goals for customer journey orchestration so they can start reaping results? Is this iterative, or what are ways that you suggest to kind of get started?
One of my favorite expressions, Craig, is you look 3 years out, but you build today. So you need to strike a balance between future vision and pragmatic efforts today. Another way of saying that is you don't want to just focus on fixing the foundation and things that are really quick and have near-term payback, or just enabling stuff in the future, where you're going to have a lot of very incremental small improvements without ever getting the big payoff. It may take you a really long time to get the payoff. Like a long road to a small house, to mix my metaphors there. So if you look 3 years out, you think about, well, where am I going to create value? What are the use cases that create the most value? And you'll have a backlog of things that you want to work on. And then you focus today. So in the next 3 months, what am I going to do? Am I going to work on my first party data? Am I going to do some proof of concepts mining unstructured data, get additional signals about kind of experience itself? Am I going to run some tests to see if I can optimize content and calls to action with some of the platforms I'm working with on journey orchestration? You do that in a combination where you're prioritizing your backlog of things to work on, and some will be green. You can do them out of the box with what's currently available in your tech stack or vendors off the shelf and POCs. Some will be red, meaning like, wow, I really need to fix some foundational things before I'm ready to do this. And some will be yellow, which means you can work on them with some workarounds, either with a broken back end during the test or with manual efforts during the test to get around the problems before you scale them, like process changes and things like that.
Yeah.
And you have a balance of green and yellow efforts in your pipeline of what you're working on, always working towards your end state vision. And you're taking an agile approach to what you're working on with your green and yellow efforts to make sure you get feedback quickly before you invest too much effort.
Before we continue, I wanted to share a key strategic resource that a majority of the Fortune 500 are already aware of. Finding the best technology, business, and talent solutions is not easy. With business demands and competitive pressures mounting, you need to be able to design, deploy, and optimize your technology to provide leading customer experiences while driving business growth. Those of you that have been listening to this show for a while know that this podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, a global provider of technology, business, and talent solutions for more than 80% of the Fortune 500. TEKsystems accelerates business transformation for their customers. Whether you're looking to maximize your technology ROI, drive business growth, or elevate customer experiences, TEKsystems enables enterprises to capitalize on change. Learn more at teksystems.com. That's TEK systems.com. Now let's get back to the show. So let's move to next topic I wanted to talk about today. So many listening to this podcast are familiar with the distinction between what we call X data or experience data and O data or operational data. I want to talk about these in the context of creating a customer-centric journey. But first, before we do that, just to make sure everybody's on the same page here, do you mind just giving a quick overview of what do we mean by X or O data?
Sure. A moment ago, we were talking about the difference between behaviors and emotion.
Yeah.
So think of behaviors as more aligned to O data. These are footprints people leave in their journey, often digitally. So for example, when you have a CRM system of your interactions with a customer that show up in like Salesforce or SAP or Microsoft CRM or others, that's O data. It's in your systems. You can track some interaction you have with a customer. A lot of the statistics and KPIs that agencies use to measure and share their success on campaigns are O data. It's what people did to interact with you along the journey that show up in your systems. Experience data are what people are thinking, feeling, and saying. So an example of experience data everyone knows about is like ratings and reviews. This is what people are sharing about their experience, what they felt, what they thought about a brand and their experience with it. A call to a call center that gets recorded and transcribed becomes data. It's unstructured data. Chatbots are unstructured data. Messaging, when you get a message about, how's your stay going so far, or you just bought that product, how's it going? That's whether it's an email or a text message or in-app, that's a form of experience data. And the vast majority of experience data is unstructured data in these types of conversations, as opposed to surveys. 90% of data is actually unstructured, and this is growing exponentially. So surveys are declining as a share of the total.
Got it. So how do you balance the X data and the O data when we're talking about customer journey orchestration approaches?
The key is to start with where you want to create value, and then think about what are the X and O data signals that I want to look at to track my progress, to inform the design of the efforts, to measure the impact I'm having along the kind of iterative improvements to that opportunity I'm working on. And looking at both the X and O data and then link those to business outcomes like CLV, like customer lifetime value, you'll find that there's a lot more predictive power to outcomes looking at the X and O data than there is at very high level metrics like CSAT or NPS.
Yeah, got it. And so, in your experience, certainly worked with a lot of brands out there that are trying to get the balance right. Where do you think a lot of brands get this balance maybe wrong, or perhaps they're overlooking something when they're making decisions based on data and orchestration?
I think one pitfall that companies fall into is they work in silos.
Yeah.
So they have one effort that's very focused using X data, whether it's NPS or CSAT or level of effort or other measures. And then they have other efforts that are using their O data, and they're not coordinating or bringing the data sets together to get a more holistic view. So like you often find with companies, I'm sure, that there are silos that occur in the organization. They're not taking advantage of bringing the data together, as well as just coordinating the efforts of the teams that are doing things that could be more in concert, but are working in silos. So I think the first pitfall is to build alignment, to avoid is to build alignment, shared goals, teams collaborating, and then leverage the data more holistically as part of those efforts to help drive progress and have more continuous insights.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, so last topic I wanted to talk about was I always talk about creating a win-win scenario. So, creating outcomes that benefit both customers and the business and fostering both loyalty and growth. Because, I don't think results are sustainable, and customer experience, it can be great for a while, but it's not going to be sustainable if there's not really the business growth and the business support and the business value being created behind it. So, while win-win sounds great, we talked about goal setting at the beginning of the show, but how do brands create this win-win scenario? Are executives and stakeholders beginning to see the long-term value and investments in the customer experience, or do you see this as still kind of an uphill battle with some, a few champions within?
A lot of the discussion about aligning brand and consumer customer, a lot of people talk about like shared values and, cause marketing and things like that. And that's actually very important. And when a brand engages in an authentic way that connects emotionally around the values of the company and the customers where they're shared, that can be very powerful. But this is actually broader than that. A lot of times people miss a really important distinction, which is very powerful, which is that branding is about what you want the customer to feel about you. So when you talk about the brand, you're often thinking about what people are thinking, feeling, and saying about your brand. Customer experience is actually about how customers feel about themselves when they're interacting with your brand. Do they feel frustrated? Do they feel energized? Do they feel XYZ? What emotion are they feeling about themselves?
Yeah.
And a really successful brand is actually thinking about both. Lou Carbone, one of my friends and mentors, calls this the brand canyon, which is the gap between the brand and what the customer is feeling about themselves and the emotions they're feeling. And that's actually win-win. If you improve the congruence of those two and the alignment of brand and CX, you're creating a win for the customer because you make them feel better. You more positive, less negative about themselves interacting with your brand.
Yeah.
So that's a win for the customer and a win for you, because then your brand is stronger because of all those cumulative interactions that are congruent with your brand strategy where they have positive emotion. And that's what makes them advocates for your brand, is the positive emotion they feel during the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of marketing and CX leaders and managers and directors listening to this show. And one thing you and I have talked about in the past as well is just the relationship between the customer experience and the employee experience. So, for those leaders and managers of people listening right now, what is the role of the employee in that? I love the way you describe the brand and the customer experience. What's the role of the employee in that, and how can leaders and managers help enable that?
There's a lot of research that shows that engaged employees are more productive as well as contribute to a better CX. And Qualtrics actually shared a lot of research on this at their recent conference about the impact of better EX on better CX. And there's a lot of other research about that as well. MIT did a study on this and others have as well. I think this goes beyond just the human resources, the HR side, when we think about employee experience, like the hire to retire moments that matter.
Yeah.
That will have a more indirect effect on your customer experience. But let's not forget that the vast majority of customer experiences involve frontline employees. So unless you're Netflix, you probably still have a lot of experiences that include human-to-human interactions with frontline employees. And a lot of these are now virtual, and there's a game of pinball between digital interactions and human-to-human interactions and bouncing back and forth between them. But very few customer experience end-to-end are purely digital. So if you have a frontline employee intensive business like healthcare, financial services, retail, hospitality, travel, increasingly consumer brands that are selling direct to consumer, and in some cases now opening stores.
Yeah.
You have a human to human interaction still that is a customer experience and employee experience at the same time, which means that your employees can contribute to a better CX, and paying attention and listening to your employees and delivering a better experience for them not only lowers churn of your employees and raises their productivity, but actually results in a higher CX too.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for joining the show. It's always great to talk with you. I've got one last question before we wrap up here, though.
Sure.
Based on what we talked about here and the articles we've written together and things like that, what is one piece of advice you would have for organizations that may need to play some catch up with their customer journey orchestration efforts as they navigate the months ahead?
I think the most important thing is to not view this as turning on technology.
Yeah.
So the technology is really powerful here, and there's a lot you can do with AI and technology, but what makes it successful are the insights you develop, the way you engage your people, the change management, the human-centered design. All of this is actually what makes it successful. And efforts that are very focused on kind of a technology-first lens are highly likely to fail.
Yeah. Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Matthew Egol, founder and CEO of JourneySpark Consulting, for joining the show. You can learn more about Matthew and JourneySpark Consulting by following the links in the show notes.
Thanks, Greg. It's been great to be with you, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.